I'm Bouchra Khalili. I'm a visual artist from Morocco. And I would like to speak this morning about two of my recent projects, which I believe have some connections with what we are discussing for this Creative Time Summit. So first, let me start with showing you a picture of Pier Paolo Pasolini's, who has played a major influence on my work for many, many, many years. On October 18, 1970, Pier Paolo Pasolini is in Sana'a, in Yemen. In one day, using leftover film rolls, he composes a short cinematic call to UNESCO, advocating for the preservation of Sana'a's historical center. And I will show you a very short excerpt of that movie, which also had a strong influence on me.
Ci rivolgiamo all'UNESCO in nome della vera, seppur ancora inespressa, volontà del popolo yemenita. In nome degli uomini semplici che la povertà ha mantenuto puri. In nome della grazia dei secoli oscuri. In nome della scandalosa forza rivoluzionaria del passato.
I couldn't find a copy with English subtitles, so I will basically translate those few words. We appeal to UNESCO in the name of the true, unexpressed wish of the Yemeni people, in the name of simple men whom poverty has kept pure, in the name of grace of obscure centuries, in the name of the scandalous revolutionary force of the past. In 1986, Pasolini's call will be eventually heard by UNESCO. Sana'a's old city is declared Patrimony of Humanity. In 2011, the Arab Spring has reached Yemen, and since 2014, a war has killed thousands of civilians amid almost total indifference and destroyed, partly, Sana'a's old city. The first time I saw this movie, I must say I was quite impressed by what he defined as the scandalous revolutionary force of the past. But when I heard it, I actually didn't think of the wonderful historical monument that we have in Morocco. I actually rather thought of something else that is part as well of our patrimony, and that I would define as a sort of alternative historiography. This alternative historiography is not the one of the power. It is the one that is made by epic tales, poems, songs, and even jokes that we share, and that go back to our silent history of rebellion. As an example, the one concerning the short-lived 17th century Republic of Saleh that was founded by pirates, the very long tradition of tribes rebellion, or more recently in time, the war of liberation conducted by Abdel Karim al-Khattabi from 1921 to 1927, during which he fought two colonial armies, the French colonial army and the Spanish colonial army that were both occupying northern Morocco, and more specifically the Reef Region, that is actually a region where Moroccan native population live. So to address this immaterial patrimony, this patrimony made of oral tales and epic, and that form as well a historiography of resistance, I started developing in 2013 a series of projects addressing specifically the history of emancipation in North Africa and in the Middle East. As a Moroccan, I of course looked closely to the history of the Reef Region, and particularly to the epic of Abdel Karim al-Khattabi. And in 2013, I went to Melilla in the north of Morocco, that is today still a Spanish enclave on Moroccan soil, what could be considered as an occupied territory, to examine the history of the Reef Republic. So this is the Reef Region, and this is a Spanish map from the colonial time of the Reef Region, and this is Abdel Karim al-Khattabi in Ajdir, in his native town. As you could see, he was quite famous in the 20s because he made the cover of Time. And this is Abdel Karim al-Khattabi and his brother in Cairo during his exile. And this is a mural graffiti that I captured in Melilla in 2013. As you can recognize him, next to him there is Ernesto Guevara, and this is not by chance. because the story that I decided to examine was this secret meeting that was organized between Ernesto Guevara and Abdelkarim al-Khattabi in Cairo in January 1959. I actually cannot be assured that it really happened, but there are many, many oral accounts saying that the meeting happened and they basically spent the whole afternoon talking to each other. However, it was never documented and it was never photographed. So I decided to go to Melilla and to somehow implement a sort of hypothesis. My idea was, what about if Guevara and Khattabi were meeting today? And what would they be saying to each other? So this is a picture of Melilla, close to a very peculiar area of Melilla. If you probably know, Melilla is surrounded by a fence. It's one among those many, many, many walls that are existing today in the world. That fence actually served for isolating Melilla from Moroccan soil, but also to prevent migrants to reach that tiny piece of Europe in North Africa. So I actually collaborated with two non-actors. One is from Morocco. It's this young man, who is Abdelkarim al-Khattabi in the film. And this young girl, who is Ernesto Guevara, they actually exchange a conversation about tactics, strategy and tactics to achieve liberation. The dialogue is actually a sort of montage made of their writings, such as their memoirs, manuals of guerrilla warfare, interviews they gave to journalists. And from all that material, I wrote, I would say, a sort of imaginary dialogue, but that is completely based on writings that both of them wrote. But let me show you like a short excerpt that is basically at the very end of the movie, then you can have a better idea of how it looks like.
احنا فقط بالبداية نخرج إلى هدوء وسلام المقابر واللي سبق ودناها والحاضر اللي متكون من صراعات والمستقبل راح يكون إلنا.
نضالنا عطى لشعوبنا الشرف والأمل والثقة في النفس وما كاين حتى هزيمة اللي تقدر تمحيهم. الآن احنا عارفين مشاكلنا ما يتحلوا من غير بإيدينا، فقط ما نجيوش قبل الوقت.
Well, I see that I have like 1 minute and 45 seconds, so I won't have time to speak of the second project, but I can give you an idea of how it looks like. It's called For in Your Face. It was produced in Algiers, and it's a continuation of this exploration of the history of emancipation in North Africa. This project focuses on Algiers between 1962 and 1972, when Algiers hosted many movements of liberation and their headquarters. For the project, I produced a film, again with two young Algerians, rewriting that history, that forgotten history, based on the collecting of many oral accounts of Algerians who were in Algiers at that time, writing photographs, video clips. I won't show you this one because I don't have time. I also produced a series of photographs documenting all the headquarters, or I should say what remains of those headquarters, empty spaces, abandoned, but that looked to me very much haunted by that revolutionary force of the past that was existing in North Africa at that time. And I produced also this print that is a silkscreen print. All those geometrical shapes that you can see there are basically the headquarters of those movements of liberation transposed into island formation, all accurately based on the shape of the buildings as they were existing in Algiers. Because the first time I saw a map, an aerial map of Algiers, knowing the geographical dissemination of all those headquarters, it actually reminded me very much of an archipelago, which to me is also a sort of metaphor of what is international solidarity. Different people, different organizations, all sharing the same will for emancipation, but also all sharing the same space and aiming to connect to each other and to meet each other in order to implement a real international solidarity. And zero, and I don't have that music that I didn't want to hear, so. Thank you.
Thanks, Bouchra.
You're welcome. I'm sorry this was very messy because in 10 minutes I never felt that.
It moves quick.
Thank you.
I know. I was thinking about, so you do a lot of archival historical research, particularly with social movements and historical figures. And when you put when that first film, when you kind of put Che Guevara into conversation, there is a certain kind of specter of the iconography of particular figures historically. And when you put them into dialogue, I was wondering, in a sense, is there moments where you're looking back at this and think, because certainly one thing that comes out is the parallels to today, or certain reference to like an ongoing historic struggle. But are there moments where you see certain moments where you think there's such slippage from what is the conversation today, or things you think these were serious flaws of the 60s, 70s, 50s that need to be corrected today? How do you feel about that? Or do you have an argumentation or ways that you're pushing back on that narrative too?
Actually, as a North African and as a Moroccan, I actually grew up hearing all of those stories because they were not in our history books. Our history books were made of the epic of the monarchy, that linear and very stable history in which the people is absent. But in those stories, the people was very much present because the people was active. He was fighting, he was resisting. And this is even more relevant in a way coming to the colonial history. However, it became for me extremely urgent to address that issue since 2011. Also because as a North African living in the West, I was following the news very closely when I was not there. And I must say I felt almost humiliated when the media started reporting what was happening in the Middle East as a Facebook revolution, as if we needed Facebook to finally be able to conduct our own liberation. And of course, it reminded me of our very long history of rebellious movements and movements of emancipation and liberation. So for me, there's absolutely no nostalgia in going back to that history. It's very much about our present and how, in some way, there is a sort of permanence of struggle for liberation and also a very much needed sense of solidarity that was existing at some time, but that can definitely comes back. And I actually planned initially to end up with this presentation with another photo of Abdelkarim al-Khattabi that I saw in demonstration in Morocco only a few weeks ago. So it's coming back. People are going back to that. And surprisingly, I saw the very same pictures in Paris, held by French from immigrant descent who were demonstrating against racism and police crimes in France, but actually referencing and claiming a heritage of struggle for emancipation in France today. So when talking about international solidarity, it also crosses the generations, and it is also a sort of nomadic movement that is literally traveling all around the world, including with the diasporas of the individuals whose parents came from those regions. Am I answering your question? Not really.
Yeah, you are.
I'm making digression, but I like it.
No, I think you answered the question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.